The internet is chock full of producers, engineers, and mixers who just have to get their takes off. And while some hot takes are actually insightful or worthy of discussion, there are some floating around that make your weird uncle's Thanksgiving dinner rant seem normal. And if I had to see them, then so do you. So let's take a look at some of the weirdest and worst recording takes that I've had the displeasure of reading. And by the way, this video is brought to you by the Producer Planner. So if your New Year's resolution is to be more productive and finish more tracks, the Producer Planner can help. So learn more about this custom planner for music producers at the link in the description, and then let's get into the takes. So the first take is one that I hear all the time, that Pro Tools is on its way out. And this is something that I've been hearing for a decade plus. It seems like every year, Pro Tools just has another year or two left before it crashes and burns. And as a loyal Pro Tools user myself, I'm a bit biased, so I got a gut check from my Instagram followers. And it turns out 69% of you guys agree with me. Nice. And while Pro Tools has had worthy challengers over the years, the truth is there's a pretty big gap between being the top dog and being totally irrelevant. Even if Pro Tools market share falls in the future, it's not like it's gonna drop off the face of the earth. If there is room for Digital Performer, Cubase, and BandLab, there will always be room for Pro Tools too. Now, next up is one that I found on Threads, and it's a real head scratcher. This user wants us to believe that you're doing something wrong if you have 40 plus tracks in your project. This one is somewhat genre dependent, but I personally don't think that 40 is even that many, especially if you're working with live instruments. Typically, I'll have 10 plus tracks just for the drum kit, a few for percussion, 2 to 3 for every layer of guitars. Basically, getting a full production to fit into 40 tracks is kind of rare for me. And most of y'all agreed, with a solid 86% saying that this take is whack. Nice work, everyone. Now let me know what your highest track count has been, because I'm curious if I'm the only one breaking 40 like very consistently. Now this next take is a bit more contentious, and it comes to us courtesy of the music production subreddit. This producer wants you to know that most of your mix issues are just bad songwriting and production. Now, the thought that a good song is easier to mix is something I've seen a lot lately, and I'm gonna call this one half true. If good songs were truly easiest to mix, then we wouldn't have albums by popular and established artists where the mixing is called into question. In my opinion, yes, I find that great songs I've worked on are easier to mix, but they're also usually written by people who are better at their instruments, better at performing, and are working with better engineers too. The whole production is elevated when pros are working on it. But that said, there are great songs with mix issues galore. The thing is, we're more likely to look past a so-so mix when the song is great. But top-level mixers who are working on hit songs still put a ton of effort into creating compelling mixes that sound incredible. And even the not so great songs they mix are usually sonically very high quality. And it seems like half true is probably correct, since this take ended up being a bit of a tie, with 44% of you guys agreeing with it. But allow me to remix this take, because if we swap in the word arrangement, then I would fully agree. Songwriting and production is so subjective, but mixing a song that's arranged in a way that's not conducive to an easy mix, if that makes sense, well, that's definitely a challenge. Now, next up is a real screamer of a take, in my opinion, which is that people who do top-down mixing will never reach the next level. If you're not familiar, top-down mixing is when you start your mix by processing on the master bus, and then individual instrument and vocal buses working on bigger groups of sounds before getting surgical with individual tracks if needed. It's a fairly new way of working, and it prioritizes getting a solid mix quickly without too many headaches. Now, a huge majority of mixers came up working the traditional way. So it is fair to expect that a majority of the household name engineers are not employing top-down mixing techniques. But that doesn't mean that it's not a valid method. So I believe in a few years, or maybe decades, there will be plenty of big name mixers banging the drum of top-down mixing. Think of it like the three-point shot in basketball. When it first came into the league, Basically, nobody was shooting threes. Established players finished their careers playing the old-fashioned way. But younger players who came up with the three-point line, well, they utilized it more and more. And kids who are growing up now watching Steph Curry are going to be developing that skill from a young age. So does that mean that top-down mixing is the way of the future? Maybe. It may end up being a fad too and never really catching on, but don't be surprised if it has its breakout moment and the next crop of young big mixers employs it more and more. Now, this take only scored a 25% with you guys, so it is a certified hot one for sure. Now, this next opinion from Threads really got me heated, and I thought it was a slam dunk of a hot take. Apparently, you can put as much EQ as you need on a $100 mic, and it will eventually sound like a $5,000 mic with a little practice and work. And because of that, the mic is the least important part of the recording process. Now, I was ready for this to be a slam dunk, an open and shut case. Certified trash take. I mean, we've got to consider EQ for sure. But that's just one part of a mic's sound. How does it handle off-axis sounds? How much detail is it capturing across the different frequency ranges? What's the transient response? How fast is it in capturing attack? This isn't stuff you can just change with EQ. For example, take a look at this guitar recording I recently did with a dynamic and a ribbon mic. You think you're replicating that difference with an EQ? But y'all have me this close to deleting my whole account and moving to a cabin in the woods because 47% of y'all agreed with the original take. Now, I kind of get it because we don't all have access to a bunch of different gear and not everyone is listening for the complete picture. And yes, of course, you can make great usable sounding recordings with budget gear, but to pretend that you can use just EQ to make a handheld dynamic mic sound like a large diaphragm condenser or a ribbon mic to sound like a dynamic, to me, that's just nonsense. But if that wasn't bad enough, I'm actually in the minority on the next one. Because according to Greg over here, you can mix on any loudspeaker once you learn how they sound in your space relative to references. And they mean anything, any speaker. Now, this is just absurd to me, but I think the more I think about it, I have an explanation. So hear me out. See, most people are working in rooms that are not acoustically treated. They've never optimized their monitor position, figured out what 85 decibels actually sounds like from their speakers. Their mix position is all wrong. Basically, the whole thing's an acoustic abomination. And if that's the case, yeah, you can upgrade your speakers 100 times and your mixes may not really improve. And that's because the limiting factor in that case is the room. Upgrade your speakers all they want. They can't defeat physics. But in an ideal acoustic environment, the difference between speakers is a lot more obvious. But about speakers, the fact is you can't mix what you can't hear. And if your speakers aren't producing frequencies that exist in the real world, you can match the reference tracks all day, but your mix will have massive holes in it that the reference might not. So in my opinion, this take can go right in the dumpster, but 76% of y'all agree with the original take. Now, I don't want to throw any shade at anyone in particular, but lots of folks who have told me there's no difference between the best top tier speakers and mixing on a laptop speaker, well, their mixes haven't usually dazzled me, but still 76%, my day's ruined, my disappointment is immeasurable. But that's not even the worst take I read today. So before I give up, let's get to a palate cleanser. One of the more oddball takes that I found is that mono objectively sounds better than stereo, which is certainly something. I will say that some classic albums that were originally mixed in mono do sound really great, and the stereo remasters that came later lost a little bit of mojo. So in a way, this take has some merit. But to just say that mono is overall better than stereo, just no. And 88% of y'all disagreed with this one and agreed with me. So to me, there's not really anything left to say about this one. But another certified flop take is that mastering is ridiculously overhyped. And I just have to ask, overhyped by who? You need to have your songs mastered, or at least you should. You can do it yourself if you want. You can skip it if you really want to, and sure, it'll end up getting level matched inside Spotify probably. But having a top level mastering engineer isn't even that expensive. And learning how to do at least a half decent master yourself isn't an impossible task, and it will make a big difference. Now, 73% of y'all agree that this take is not it, so that's good. Faith in humanity, restore. Now, there was another 73-27 vote that was pretty brain busting, and that's the take that Neumann mics and anything with a ribbon stopped being relevant when tape died. And I have to ask, what does that even mean? Now, I'd argue that Neumann mics, especially tube mics and ribbon mics, are actually more useful with the advent of digital, since it does add some color to the signal chain. I mean, I never really worked with tape, but I still love all these mics, so not really sure what's going on here. But it's time. This last take is one that is so ridiculous, so confounding, so I don't even know what to call it. So let's just talk about it. Now, this is a secondhand take because this poor, unfortunate musician needs our help convincing their drummer that they are recording that the kick drum, the one in the middle with the pedal, is an important part of drumming. Like, honestly, I'm at a loss here because apparently not only does this drummer think that the kick drum is too heavy, the other guys in the band agree and think that a kick drum is just extra noise. I don't even know what to say here. I didn't even put this one up to a vote because I don't want to hear from anyone that agrees with this drummer and his bandmates. Tell me how you're going to record an album with toms, cymbals, a snare, but no kick. And you're so sure that this is a good idea that you're willing to lose bandmates over it. I don't know. So anyway, let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with me about any of these takes, or leave your own below if you want to be a part of the next video. And then watch this video next if you want to hear some even more ridiculous recording advice that I've heard. All right, I'll see you next week.